Hey there, hello, Sindre here, Associate Professor in Industrial Economics. This is on a mini lecture in Win 100, Introduction to Offshore Wind Energy. Yes, that's the course. Okay, the topic of this mini lecture is contracting. That's a pretty big topic. We have two courses, two ECTS courses, so that's 600 hours specifically on contracting in this study program of industrial economics, and I don't really teach either of them. But I do teach project management and I teach project cost estimation. So I'm teaching kind of the context around contracting, and also teaching about figuring out one of the key parameters of contracting. If you're going to make a contract, you need to know the target cost, the estimated cost of the project. And that is what my second course is about, estimating the project cost. So the context and one of the input parameters. So I'm kind of missing a little bit here, in the middle. So if you need more information, more insight, you can look at these two other courses that I am not directly involved in. But this is the mini lecture. We're using scraping the surface here. So let's take a step back here. What are we dealing with? Well, fundamentally, we are still within the context or discipline of project management. I have another mini lecture where I talk about project management as a discipline. What is that? Just to summarize that, a project is a specific type of activity or endeavor or task. It's an activity that has three primary characteristics. It is unique, either in its output or its process to make this output. It is intentionally temporary, and it has what we call a process of progressive elaboration. It kind of means that the task is so complicated that we don't know everything ahead of time, what it will involve. There will be surprises along the way, and we need to adapt to that. So progressive elaboration. So that is a project. So a project is not something that we just do for the fun of it. Well, I guess we can do it for fun if we want to, but usually there's a reason for it. And that reason is to create some kind of deliverable, a product or a service or a combination of those two, that is supposed to cover some kind of business need or business want. So we're trying to achieve something. And we're going to achieve this something by making this project deliverable. Now, this project deliverable, it doesn't just pop out of the air. We need to do a certain amount of work in order to create this deliverable, obviously. What exactly that work is, that is an entire topic in of itself to figure out what that is. The fundamental tool that we use to figure out what the work involves to create deliverables, that is called the work breakdown structure, VBS. That's a technique they can use in order to elucidate the work packages, what you need to do in order to create the deliverables. But imagine all of this work. There are fundamentally two ways you can accomplish this work. You can do it yourself, or the organization that owns the project, that wants to do the project, they can do it themselves, and that will be called an in-house solution. Or they can get someone else to do it for them, and that will be called procurement. So the work that you need to do in order to create a deliverable, in order to satisfy the business need or business want, it can be accomplished either in in-house solution or through procurement. Now, procurement, that is kind of where contracting enters the equation. The procurement phase consists of four distinct stages or parts. First of all, you need to figure out what exactly do you want to put out for procurement and what do you want to do yourself. Once you have decided on what you want someone else to do for you, you need to find a list of candidates and potential companies or individuals who can do this work for you, and that is called solicitation. Once you have this list, you need to decide on which one to work with, and that is called the third phase, awarding. There you engage in some kind of contract, And the final phase is contract administration, which is just to make sure that your contractor is doing what you want them to do and that they are behaving in accordance with the contract. So that is kind of the context. But if you're going to get an external company to do the work for you, for legal reasons, it's necessary to usually engage in some kind of contract. So a contract is basically just an agreement that someone is going to do something for us. So we need to kind of specify exactly what that is that they're going to do. And you're also going to specify in there, the payment structure, how they will be paid and how risk will be shared. So a contract is kind of like a handshake. It takes two to tango. So the two parties involved in the contract here is, on one side we have the people who wants to do the project. They can be called, the contract owner or the client or the sponsor of the project. So they are one side of this handshake. On the other side of the handshake, you have the individual organization or companies that will carry out the work, through procurement, and that is called the contractor. So on one side we have the client, and on the other side we have the contractor. So a contract will basically specify who are these people, who is the client and who is the contractor. And the contract will specify what work should the contractor do for the client. Contracts, they come in many shapes and form. Like if you really want to, you could say that there's an infinite number of potential variations of contracts. But there are some main types that we are going to talk a little bit about there. So one of the most important or a very prominent part of a contract is the sharing of risk and also the payment structure. How will the client, how will the contractor, be compensated and paid by the client? So you can imagine there are two kind of basic main type of contracts, with endless variation within them, and we can kind of demonstrate how these contracts look like by using what's called a payoff diagram. Now in this payoff diagram, you have the y-axis and the x-axis. On the x-axis, you typically have the actual cost of the project. And that is something that you don't know before the project is actually done and completed and over with. What did the project actually end up costing? Or what did the work packages that you're using, that you're carrying out with procurement, what did that end up costing? You don't know that ahead of time. But that is one of the axes. Actual cost on the x-axis. On the y-axis, however, you have money, or payoff, if you want to have a more formal term for it. And since we have two new parties involved here, the client and the contractor, we're going to have two different curves or two different functions plotted in this diagram. One of this curve is going to be the price that the client is going to pay to the contractor, the payoff from one party to the other party. And the second curve is going to be the fee. And that is the profit earned by the contractor. So you're going to plot two different functions in here. And how exactly these functions look like, that depends on the contract. And that's sort of the main things that the contract is all about, to specify what will these curves look like. So sticking to the most basic types of contracts, there are essentially two primary types of contracts that you can use. And then of course there is more advanced versions, so looking at different sources, different books there, they will have different categorization, but keeping at the basics, two different types. In one type of contract, you are essentially putting all of the risk on the client, and in another type you are putting all of the risk on the contractor. That's kind of the main difference. Then you have more advanced type of contracts which try to share the risk somehow between these two parties. So part of the risk will be carried out by the contractor, another part of the risk will be carried out by the client. So because of that, an infinite number of ways you can do that, so therefore you get an infinite number of contracts. So two main types and then something in between, right? So let's start with these two extremes. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is this called a fixed price contract or lump sum contract. So the idea here is that all of the risk should be put on the contractor. So the client is, on paper, not going to carry any risk, and we're going to get back to a little bit later that this is in practice not really true, but like purely theoretical, the idea behind the contract here is that all of the risk should be carried exclusively by the contractor. So in this type of contract, we're going to get a price curve that is horizontal. It does not change. So the price that the owner or the client has to pay to the contractor is not going to change whatsoever, regardless of what the actual cost happened to be. All of the risk is absorbed by the contractor. The second curve in this diagram is the fee, and that is going to decrease at a 45-degree line with the actual cost. So somewhere on the x-axis here, we're going to write or draw a vertical line, and that is going to denote what the target cost of this work is, so the estimated cost of the work package or the project. And to figure out the target cost, that is a complicated thing, and that is what one of my courses is all about. That is IND 550, Project Cost Estimation and Risk Analysis. In that course, I teach different methods for estimating what is the cost of the project going to be. So if you want more information on that, you can of course enroll in that course or look up some of my other videos or lecture notes that I have put out. If you don't want to commit to 10 ECTS, 300 hours of work. So somewhere there on the x-axis, you put the target cost, the estimated cost. So what you can imagine here is that if something goes wrong in the project and we have a cost overrun, that means that the actual cost will be greater than the target cost. We're going to move away or move to the right on the x-axis. And as you can see here from the payoff diagram, nothing happens to the price. So in the eventuality of some cost overrun, the client is not affected or impacted by that in theory. But the contractor, however, their fee, their profit is reduced. So if there is $1 of cost overrun, then that means $1 reduction in the profit of the contractor. So it's a one-to-one relationship there. So that kind of means that 100% of the risk here is being carried by one party. No, the exact opposite type of contract, that would be a reimbursable contract, for instance, a cost plus fixed fee contract. That looks kind of like the exact opposite. So here we see that the fee is exactly the same regardless of what happens with the actual cost of the project. So if there is $1 of cost overrun, well, the contractor earns the same. If there is if the contractor managed to save on money to do the project more efficiently than initially predicted and estimated, if there is $1 of cost underrun, well, then nothing happens to the profit of the contractor. However, you can see that the price that is affected on a one-to-one relationship by cost overrun and cost underrun. So that is just going to be a 45-degree line, and it's going to intersect the y-axis, where whatever the fixed fee for the contractor is. So here we have the case that like 100% of the risk is carried, this time not by the contractor, but exclusively by the client. So that's the two main different types of basic contracts. And of course there are variations of these two. So you might think that if you form a partnership, why should one party carry all the risk and the other one carry none of the risk? Is that a good idea? You don't really have incentives here. So for instance, with the reimbursable contract, the cost plus fixed fee, the contractor has no incentive whatsoever to try to be more efficient, or to try to improve, or to try to save cost. They are compensated either way, so it doesn't matter. So they can, they don't have to be careful. So some might think that's a bad idea, and therefore we have created a contract which tries to share the risk, to split it between the two parties. And that is called your incentive contracts, and that can be considered its own kind of category. But we can turn both the fixed price contract into an incentive version, and we can do the same with the cost plus fixed fee contract. And that is a lot more complicated. I'm going to show you the two diagrams for these two variations. So one of them is the cost plus incentive fee, and the other one is the fixed price incentive. These contracts are more complicated. I have made one video that is available where I talk about how to calculate the final price and the fee when it comes to the cost plus incentive fee contract. So that's an entire video on its own. You can watch that if you want further information. And if you want even further information, I will talk about that in my project management course. And if you want even further information, you can take one of those two contracting courses that I'm not involved in. So that is the basics of the contracts. So let's switch gear here a little bit. Like, which contract here is the best? That's a difficult question to answer. From a theoretical point of view, there are a lot of arguments, both good and bad, for every single type of contract out there, essentially. So I don't think this is a question that we can answer purely from like a theoretical point of view. So what we instead are going to do, we are going to look at empirical research. And I'm specifically going to reference here a book written by Marrow, published in 2011. And the title of the book is Industrial Mega Projects, plural. I don't have the book here right with me, but I'll put it on the screen. I know there's a newer version that came out a couple of years ago that updates this book. I haven't had time, fortunately, to look at that myself, so I'll just be referencing the 2011 version. But I think the conclusions are pretty much the same. It's just that now he has 1 decade more of data. So let's first take a brief look at what data that Marrow is using. All right, let's see what Marrow has in his book. So if you look at the table, his data set consists of 318 projects. So in terms of project management, that is actually quite a substantial data set. There's a little bit historical background. In 2002, Flyberg, Danish professor, he published an article with a couple of co-authors, of course, where they published what they claimed to have been the first ever statistically significant empirical research on project management or project performance. And that was, I believe, 268 observations projects, something in that order of magnitude, around 250 if I remember correctly. So that was like the first ever statistically significant study. So that kind of puts into context what we can expect in terms of sample size. If it was not project management, then I would say this is not a very big data set. But given how difficult it is to get access to data on projects, this is pretty big. Until 2023, when Flyberg published a book which was kind of summarizing a lot of his research from the 2-3 previous decades. So what he has done is to construct an even larger database. So in 2023, at the time of writing or publishing his book, that database was 16,000 projects. So that is substantially bigger. But nevertheless, let's look at Marrow's dataset. It's 318 observations, as I said, and these are all mega projects. Mega project just means that the capital expenditure, the capex, the investment cost, is greater than X amount of dollars, usually like a billion. But it kind of depends because of inflation. But large projects, and all of them are like industry projects. Hence the name of the book, Industrial Mega Projects. So what do we have? The largest class or category here is oil and gas production. That's 130 observations, so 41% of the sample. Then we have more from the oil and gas industry. We have petroleum processing and refining. We have minerals and metals, chemicals, LNG, power generation, and pipelines, and another category. So none of this is what this introductory course is about. Wind 100, which is about offshore wind power, wind energy. But still, that's also an industrial mega project, so there should be some commonalities here. Okay, so decent enough sample size, and data comes from all over the world. We have projects from Canada, USA, South America, we have Africa, Middle East, Oceania, Asia, Central Asia, and Europe, of course. So all over the world. So that's pretty good. And these projects, they do vary a little bit in terms of like how innovative the projects are. If you're going to talk about the success of the projects, you kind of need to know the complexity. Was innovative technology being used? So Merrill does talk a little bit about that too in his book. But okay, contracts. What does the data tell us? The first figure from his chapter 11 specifically that I want to show you is just this pie chart showing the proportion of different contracts being used in these 318 projects. And definitely the largest category here is what he calls EPC lump sum. So engineering, procurement, and construction lump sum, that's like the fixed price contract. That was the contract where we put all of the risk on the contractor, and the client gets the same price no matter what happens in terms of the performance of the project in terms of cost. So that is definitely the most common. 53%, so slightly more than half of the projects. The second largest here, with a quarter of the data, 25%. That is the cost plus contract, or reimbursable as he calls it. Then we have 12%, which he calls alliance, and that is what I referred to as incentive contracts, where you try to share the risk between the client and the contractor. And the final one here is called mixed, and that is when you don't use like one specific type of contract. You don't either use lump sum or reimbursable or alliance. You're kind of changing back and forth between different types of contracts, or you are having different contracts for the different contractors involved. A few things to say about this. So Merrill doesn't really find any kind of trend in terms of this frequency over time. It doesn't change that much over time. He didn't manage to find any kind of systematic reason or heterogeneity across different industries. But where he did find some significant variation, that has to do with the geographical location. So some parts in the world tends to favor more one particular type of contracts compared to another type of contracts, and that might be different in another part of the world. And then one more thing he says about the frequency here is that it's pretty evident from the data that governments really like to have lump sum contracts. And he speculates that could be because they erroneously believe that that's the safest option. But as we will see, is that really the case though? So first off here, or second off here, we get this bar plot, which shows us the success rate of each of these four main categories of contract types. So the lump sum, from left to right there, lump sum, then the cost plus or reimbursable, then the alliance, and then the mixed contract. Now, before we list up the specific results here, it is important to keep in mind what is meant by success. So if you've seen my other video in this course where I talk about project management, I define success as the absence of cost overrun, benefit shortfalls, and delays. And there is some disagreement in the literature, like where do you put threshold? Okay, sure, you can measure the success of a project in terms of how much cost overrun there is, but where do you put the threshold? Fleabag that I mentioned, he's a proponent of saying, okay, at 0%, if you have like $1 of cost overrun, then the project is a failure in terms of cost. But Marrow does not take that perspective. He argues, which he writes a lot about in the beginning of his book, is that it's unreasonable to have the threshold at 0. Instead, he operates with 25%. So you can have up to 25% the schedule overrun, up to 25% benefit shortfall, and up to 25% cost overrun. Now, I do understand his sentiment that 0 is an unreasonable standard, but I'm not so sure that I have a feeling we have gone too far in the other direction. So I have put up, in another course, I put up an example where if you actually add 25% your schedule overrun, delays, and cost overruns and benefit shortfall, that makes a project that was somewhat profitable into like a financial black hole. So 25% in my opinion is a little bit too much. But that doesn't really matter. All we need to know is that the success rate here is conditional on that it needs to be beyond 25% before it is considered a failure. So if you look at the lump sum here, it has, it's a grayscale here, it's a little bit hard to read. Let's see, success is the darker one. So the lump sum has a success rate of about 40%. Okay, so that's our baseline, 40%. Half of the contracts were lump sum contracts, and among these contracts, 40% of them were a success, which means that they have less than 25% in all these three fundamental constraints. Okay, what about the reimbursable? Well, that one has a success rate that is far lower. It is almost down to 20%. So, half as successful, seemingly. Half as successful. Then the next one here is Alliance, and it is even further down. This is a bit hard to say, but less than 10%, it looks like this by eyeballing data. So less than 10% success rate. Okay, that is not good. Then we get the mixed contract, and that one has a success rate of around 90%. Okay, so that is quite something. Okay, so this right here is unconditional statistics. But what about the conditional statistics? The thing is that Marrow does not think contracts is all that important. He writes that it's a second order consideration. So what he means by that is that there are other things that is more important to determine the success of a project, and the contract type itself doesn't really matter all that much. You don't see that from the unconditional statistics, but once you run inferential statistics, conditional statistics, regression analysis, and specifically he's using what's called a logit regression, you'll see that it doesn't really matter all that much. So if we run this logit regression and we control for different types of drivers of success, determinants of success, what Marrow finds is that there is no significant difference in performance between the lump sum and the reimbursable contract. They are equally as good or bad in terms of success rate. So why do we see such a big difference in the performance? Well, that has to do with reverse causality, because you tend to choose the lump sum contract when you have very little uncertainty and when you have projects that are not that complex. The moment you have a project that is complex and with a lot of uncertainty, contractors will simply not will refuse to engage in a lump sum contract. So for that reason, they will opt for reimbursable. So it's reverse causality. Difficult projects tends to have the reimbursable contract. Simple and easy projects, tend to have the fixed price contract. So the moment you control for the level of uncertainty, there isn't really any difference in the success rate here between these two type of contracts. When it came to alliance and mixed, they were significantly different from lump sum and reimbursable. Alliance was significantly worse, and the mixed one was significantly better. And you can go and read the chapter if you want his discussion and debate, like why he thinks that is. But the reason why mixed is performing so well is because the client tends to be more competent when they use mixed contracts. You can kind of think of it like this. What is the best tool if you are a carpenter? Is it a screwdriver or is it a hammer? Well, obviously you need both of them. So in mixed contract, you're using the whole toolbox. Therefore, you're obviously going to be more likely to be successful. But like there's a lot of discussion in that chapter, so you can go and read that if you want. But we can disaggregate this success to a high level of granularity. So if you remember from my other video in this course, we disaggregated success into 3 dimensions: cost, time, and scope. And Marrow is doing basically the same thing. So if you look at this figure, you can see the success rate in terms of cost to run, in terms of schedule run, and in terms of benefit shortfall. And you see basically the same pattern here. No significant difference between lump sum and reimbursable. Alliance is significantly worse, and mixed is significantly better compared to the baseline here of the lump sum contract. Okay, there are so much details that would be interesting to talk about, but I'm afraid to open this can of worms, so I think we're just gonna have to end it here. We are probably approaching 30 minutes now. So if you want further details, you can check out Marrow 2011 Industrial Mega Projects. It is specifically chapter 11. You can check out the 2 courses that I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I am not personally involved in. And you can also check out my 2 project management courses if you want more of the surroundings of contracting. Okay, hope you learned something. Good luck with this course.